Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining my first session of the Guest Expert Series. Today I have Sarah Losi on of Favorite Daughter Media, and she's going to talk about all things podcast guesting. So I'm super excited to share with you guys. And if at any point you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Sarah's going to go through a presentation from at the beginning, and then in the end, she's going to do a Q&A. But if at any point your question is too burning, but you think you're going to lose it, put your hand up. Sarah will stop and we'll give you the floor and you can ask the question. Okay, so without further ado, Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. A little bit about me. I am a podcast producer. I have been producing a podcast. We're now in season 5. And I've been helping my host and other creators guest on podcasts for several years now. I also do a lot of guesting myself, and I'm about to launch my own podcast next week. So I've been in this podcast world for years now, and I love it so much. It's brought me so many different opportunities, and I want you guys to be able to experience some of that. So I'm going to talk about first why your business needs a podcast, go through my 10 best reasons why podcasting is great for business, and then walk you guys through my steps for being a great podcast guest. So if you're ready. So to start, are my slides up? Did I do it right? Perfect. I've only been using this for like 3 years. You can't expect miracles. So why does your business need a podcast? I have 10 reasons why these tools are just so great for business growth. First of all, they really help you build a community. So podcasts have been growing super quick, and they are a very personalized media that can help you establish a community around your brand and establish relationships with your customers. So for regular listeners, you get to give them that sense of belonging and that sense that they really know you and they're surrounded by people that understand them. The second reason is that they fuel connections. They give you a chance to share your story and expertise in a way that really creates those deep connections. Listeners are more engaged with podcasts than with other media, and it's also been proven that they're more likely to buy a product that they hear on a podcast. Skipped one. Skip 2. So the third reason why they're great is that they are actually really cost effective. There are ways that you can do this with a huge budget and fancy production companies, but you can also DIY it. So it's a very easy way to DIY something. If you have some decent tech and software, connect with me later if you want some details on what you should buy. But the reach that they can have for such little cost is unmatched. So they're a really great tool for small businesses that have limited marketing. And then the fourth is that they establish you as a thought leader. So thought leadership is one of like the main tenets of my business. I really, really love the goal of thought leadership versus sales. Thought leadership is a way to get yourself into that global conversation and leverage your knowledge and your experience on that global stage. And it's also a really great way to establish trust and to establish that you are someone to listen to about whatever topic it is that you talk about. And then they help your business stand out. Even though this is such a huge media and it's something that's growing really fast, it's still pretty small compared to other media. I want to say there's about 60 million podcasts out there, or 200 million podcasts, 200,000 podcasts. But there's like billions of YouTube channels. So while it feels like a big number, comparatively, it's still pretty small. So it's kind of one of those emerging media right now. And having a podcast makes you different. And my favorite reason, they are powerful lead gen tools. So by promoting products and services to your podcast audience, you're promoting to someone that you've already built trust with. So that makes it easier to generate leads and inspire sales. Plus, you can offer exclusive deals and discounts to your audience, which incentivize them to try your offer and then become lifelong customers. So you're really capitalizing on that trust that you've been building. My other favorite is that they're really great for SEO. So SEO is search engine optimization. This is how search engines like Google find your content so that when someone searches for something that you do, you come up on the search results. And this is a really, really important way to get found by your potential customers. So by creating a podcast, you're consistently adding new content to your website. And then not only do you have the podcast, when I think about content creation, and I've been in the content creation space for many years now, I always like to think of it as kind of an inverted triangle. So how can we find a big piece of content that we can then break down into smaller pieces? So a podcast is that really great big piece, because from there, you can have a transcript that you add to the web page that's going to take all of the keywords that you've said in that episode and add them to your website for SEO. You can turn that transcript into a blog post. One of the things I often talk about is that people have their preferred way of consuming media. So a podcast listener is a podcast listener. A YouTube watcher is a YouTube watcher. The way that people get their media is very specific to them. And it's not easy to make them change. So by starting with a podcast and then turning that into a blog, you get the SEO from the blog and the podcast, but you can reach an audience that doesn't listen to podcasts. You can reach the audience who wants to read. And it all comes from that one episode. And then from there, you have all your social media creative, you have your reels and your TikTok videos, your quote graphics, all of those little pieces that you can use to promote your business, just taken from that one piece of content. The next is that they provide great insight into your audience. So when you have a podcast, you get a lot of data and you can analyze your listeners' behavior, or even just look at what the most popular topics are. But you can gain a better understanding of who your audience is and what they're looking for. And by doing that, you can start creating content that will resonate. This can even help you change what you're doing as a business. If you're getting a lot of really great traction about something that's more of just a side offering, that might show you like, this is what I should be focusing on. So it's a really, really great way to get some data that's otherwise hard to come by. You can get demographics, listener habits, all of this different ideas that can help you understand their preferences. And they're proven to have higher conversion rates and higher profits. Number 9 goes along with what I said about being a thought leader. It helps you stay on top of mind. So this is particularly important for businesses that have a long sales cycle or a product that only needs to be purchased once in a while. So if you use a podcast, you can establish a long-term relationship. So when the time does come for that purchase to be made, you're the brand that they think of. So podcasting doesn't only have to be a buy now call to action. It's just continuously giving them content, giving them reason to think about you, and reminding them of this is what you do, this is what you're best at. So it's just like with cars. You only buy a car every 10 years? But if you're constantly hearing great information about a certain car brand, when it's time to buy a car, that's the brand you go to. So this is that same idea. And reason number 10, they're fun. This may seem silly, but podcasts are really fun, especially if you're doing it with somebody else, if you're doing it interview-based, whatever it is, they're just a really fun thing to create. If you're in an industry that doesn't let you be super creative, they're a really great outlet. I was in finance for 3 years, and I did not love finance, especially at the beginning. I love it now, but at the beginning, I didn't love it at all. I thought a 401k was a charity race. I knew nothing, but I started producing a podcast and I got to design the graphics for it and write the quotes and do all of this different stuff that was letting me be more creative than I could have been otherwise. And I've met people that I never would have met. I've had experiences that I never would have experienced just because I'm in the podcaster world. And it has changed my life to the point that I launched my company focused solely on podcasting. So it's definitely something that is fun and something that If you're just looking for something new and something refreshing, I recommend doing it. And so that was all about creating your own podcast. Before I go into podcast guesting, does anybody want me to pause for a question? Nope. All right. So let's go on. So for podcast guesting, I have 5 goals that I want every podcast guest to use in order to be a really great guest. So those are: define your story, determine your unique value, create a lead magnet, build trust, and then move the audience offline. I'm going to go through these all one by one. So first is define your story. The reason this is important is because there are a lot of people out there who want to guest on podcasts. So you have to stand out. And information is everywhere. Any question that a host can ask you about a topic can probably be Googled. So realistically, they don't need you. But what you can't Google is the part that's personal to you. So what is it about you that makes you so relevant and important to this topic? So how has your experience shaped the way you look at things? How has your what you've learned along the way changed the way you look at this? What is it about you that makes you different? What is it about the topic that makes you excited? How do you interpret the facts based on experience? Why do people need to hear about it? Information is objective, but your story is not. But when I get to this point, I also feel like it's really important to say that your story doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be dramatic or traumatic. It doesn't have to be this insane experience that nobody else could ever have imagined. I'm going to tell you guys my story in a couple slides, and it's an anecdote I used to tell at a bar. That is the story that launched my career, and it's just something that I would tell at a bar. So just know that when it comes to your story, as long as you can find the value in it, it's a good story. And sometimes that value is just making somebody laugh because they're having a bad day. So I just want you guys to know that there is value in your story, even if it doesn't seem like the one that you would hear on the news. So the second step is determining your value. And something that you hear a lot in the podcast space is about leading with value. So before you ever pitch yourself to a podcast, you need to ask yourself, what will the audience gain from listening to you? Because your value is in your story. So you want to focus on what those lessons that you've learned from your experience are versus something that you could have read in a book. So case study. I'm going to tell you guys about how I accidentally got booked on Stacking Benjamins. Now, this is one of the biggest finance podcasts out there. It has a massive audience. They are full-time professional podcasters. I could not dream of having a show as successful as theirs. Yet somehow I ended up on it. I approached a host, Joe, trying to get the host of my podcast, Eric Brotman, on his show. He is an expert in all things personal finance. He has all the letters after his name. And I wanted just to get him on the show to talk about some kind of finance topic. The response that Joe gave me was, I don't want an expert. I want someone with a cool story. At that point, I'm pretty sure I had a stroke because what I said next was, do you want to hear about the time I went to Ireland and got a tattoo of a penis? He did. He did want to hear that. And I got booked on his show. That was not what I was trying to do. I make jokes when I'm uncomfortable. And somehow that worked because he's like, that is a great story. I want my audience to hear it. So I told him the story. He invited me on the show to share it. And that's when I realized that there's value in it because it's so purely authentic. I got an embarrassing tattoo. For the record, I had asked for an airplane. not really on purpose. But I had had an experience that opened my eyes to my own potential and gave me the courage to take back control of my life. I had realized that I was in a dead-end job, a dead-end relationship. I was trying to find my own reset button, basically. And I took a solo trip to another country. I learned that I didn't need to rely on a relationship or an employer to be happy. I saw so much more to life than this job that just didn't excite me anymore. And it didn't take long for me to realize that I needed to do other things that scared me. So I went home. I quit the dead end job and the dead end relationship. I left the state in search of fresher starts and better tacos. I accepted a job in finance, which I had no interest in, but it paid a lot more than anything else that was hiring. And I started working for people who really saw my worth. So I found my voice and I made sure my ideas were heard in a company of more experienced and far more polished professionals, where I brought about more change for that firm than anyone before me. And I convinced myself that I could do it on my own and launched a company that was all mine, because I'd already proven to myself that I could do things on my own and I could do things that scared me. So by telling him the story that I thought was just a ha, I tell this at the bar to get a laugh, he saw the value in it. And he saw that it was a journey of self-discovery and a professional development. And he brought me on his show to share that story with hundreds of thousands of people. So when I say your story doesn't have to be profound, that's what I mean. Just own the story that really makes you you. So you guys all have a story that stands out in your mind when you read this question. So I really, whether it's right now or after this presentation, I want you to take a minute and really just write down what that story is. What is that one story that when someone asks, what's your story? This is the one that comes to mind. And I gave you my example, but after you write that down, I want you to then write down what the value is in that story. Whether you just write one word, whether you write a whole essay, what is the value in that story? And then once you have it, create your lead magnet. So this is the part where it gets a little nerdy. I love the nerdy part, but your value gets you booked on the show, but then you need to create a system that turns the podcast appearance into conversions. And that's what lead magnets are for. So a lead magnet is a piece of valuable content that you give away for free in exchange for someone's information. So you get they get the content, and then you get to add them to your marketing funnel, and you start creating a relationship with them, and eventually you get them to give you money. But the key is to have that lead magnet tie into your story. So you want it to be relevant to what you're talking about and relevant to what you're selling. So it can take a lot of brainstorming to kind of figure out what the perfect thing is. And we'll talk about that at the end as well. But there's so many different options, and something is going to resonate with you and your audience. Personally, I've used webinars, I've used ebooks, I've used checklists. My friend Tiffany Grant of Money Talk with Tiff has a really great quiz on her website that has worked phenomenally for her. So there's different ways that you can do this. And if you just use a little bit of creativity or hire someone who might have a little more, if you're not a creative person, you can create something that's really great and that will really resonate. And then once you figure out what that thing is going to be, you just have to do the technical piece of it, which is pretty easy. You just put it behind an email form. You connect the email form to your email software, create the landing page or a microsite, give it a memorable name. One thing I really push people to do when they're doing this is buy a URL that is unique to this piece. So everything that I do for my business, while my URL is favoritedaughtermedia.com, I have different URLs based on what I'm trying to get people to do. so that they never have to go to my homepage and then click around to try to find what I want them to find. I want it to be the first thing that they find. And I know I'm going through this technical piece a little fast, so if you do want me to help you with it later, reach out to me. But the most important part I want you to remember is give it a name that is memorable. And then you build your funnel. It's email marketing funnels. You write out the emails and just continue to offer value in those emails. If you're just getting sales messages to your inbox over and over again, you're going to unsubscribe. But if you joined an email list to get something valuable and they continue to send you things that are valuable to you, you're going to stay and you're going to continue to open them. So just remember while you're putting these funnels together to write it in a way that would have resonated with you if you were the customer. Then I have one more case study. So like I said, I'm the producer of a podcast called Don't Retire, Graduate. And one of the things that he wanted to talk about was that nobody likes paying taxes. And unless you're a billionaire or certain former presidents, you probably have to. But there are 4 ways that you can reduce your income taxes legally. So this was a really valuable conversation that he wanted to have with podcast hosts. So he put them into an ebook and he put them onto a landing page and he bought a URL that was lowtaxbook.com. So we pitched this topic to all different podcasts. One of them was Bigger Pockets Money. If anyone, I see Clifton definitely has heard of them. They are another massive finance podcast. And I don't have their data, but on YouTube, that video was viewed over 20,000 times. And YouTube is usually the smaller numbers. So it's pretty safe to say that got a couple downloads. And he gave this URL as his call to action and invited listeners to go to that site and download the ebook and read about those 4 ideas and how they can work. When that show went live, more than 4,000 people went to that URL and downloaded the ebook. They got added to our mailing list, which doubled our mailing list in a week. It's been about 4 years since this specific example, and we're still tracing new clients and new business and thousands in revenue to this one lead magnet. So they are so powerful if you can get them in front of your target audience and make sure that they have value in them. Okay, so that brings us to the 4th step, which is establishing trust. Is anybody's favorite TV genre infomercials? No, I didn't think so. Yeah, Clifton, you love an infomercial?
I still watch them. Like I use like set it and forget it in everyday speech. So yeah, they're great. They're
It sounds like a personal problem.
yeah, but they're so good at selling. Like the format, the template, it's magical. But yes, you asked and I answered, and then you still
did.
So thanks for
You
that.
did.
So just in case anyone else is thinking about contributing, you're gonna get shot down. No, I'm just joking.
Don't worry, I'll bully everybody. No, most people don't listen to infomercials for fun, Lester Clifton. So if you're going to go on a podcast, don't treat it like it's an ad. If I were to go up to you out of nowhere and try to sell you my services, you're not going to buy them because you have no reason to. You don't have any reason to trust me. So if you're trying to capture an audience so that they will follow your call to action or buy your product or listen to your podcast, you need to focus on establishing trust. So the reason that I told you to lead with your story and your value is because that's how you start building that trust. Use the time that you're on the podcast not to sell your product or services, but to share your story, to lead with that value, to be authentic. That is the most valuable thing you can do, is just be authentically you. And position yourself as an expert on the topic that you're speaking on. This is what will captivate the audience and make them want to connect with you again. And that will bring you to the final step, which is take it offline. So this is your CTA. This is if you want to learn more about blah, 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 or I created a free version of this, and go to leadmagnet.com to enter to win. Whatever it is, by having them follow your instructions, go to your URL and give you their email addresses, they're basically inviting you to continue the conversation outside of the podcast episode. So this is going to give you the chance to turn their audience into your audience. And you've already set up your lead magnet funnel, your auto response emails. So they're going to start hearing from you, and they're going to start finding more value in what you're presenting, and they're going to turn into clients. And just to prove it, here's mine. So if you guys want, like I said, there's so many different types of lead magnets that you can create. And I put together an ebook of 50 of them. So these range from webinars and checklists to recipes and all the different types of content that you can create very easily. None of them are super hard to do, super technical. You can do it yourself. And these will help you grow your email list and help you grow your business. So it's favoriteleadmagnets.com because I bought a URL and I branded it to sound like my company, and it's memorable. So feel free to go either scan that QR code or go to the landing page and download that ebook, and you will get all of the 50 ideas to start growing your own business. And now I can answer questions, and I promise I won't bully you.
All right, I'll ask a question because I've got questions. Sarah, thank you for that. Thank you so much. I've been back and forth on whether I should create a podcast or not. And you keep pushing me towards it, and I think it's great. One question I have, and this is kind of a weird one because I don't know how many people have done much guest posting, but it's something that's come up a lot for me lately, in that I finished the podcast, great conversation, everything's going great. And I'm all about, I'll promote it on my sites and all the rest, but I still feel like I want to thank or give back to the host in a way, and I just don't know the best way to do it. I don't want to send some stupid swag that's going to get tossed in the garbage, nor do I want to try to figure out how to even get them something. So I'm still trying to figure out the best way to truly, show appreciation to the podcast host and or their crew, other than just providing them copies of my book, which I do anyways. So I'm just trying to see if you had any thoughts on that one, because that's been bothering me for a little while.
Yeah. So as a podcast producer, we rely not, it's kind of a two-way street. It's we're giving you access to our audience, but you're giving us access to yours. So we're giving you 30 minutes to talk, or an hour, whatever it is, to talk to our audience and share who you are. And then we expect you to share the episode and do all of that. So definitely, as much as you can share it is one of the best gifts that you can give a podcaster. Reviews of the show, writing a review. You can even let them know, like, I have screenshot the copy of my review and send it to them. Like, hey, just wanted to thank you again for letting me on the show. I left a great review of the show. It's attached if you want to read it. Really love the experience.
Love that.
So that's a really great way. But then also continue the relationship. So don't let it end there. I know people who have created podcasts that were hugely successful, and they ended up quitting because they felt like the guests were just using them for free ad space, which is one of the reasons that I built my company, because what I do is help you be that better guest. And part of that is how you continue that relationship. So
say more on that, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's I have the great conversation. I feel like I connect with the person. I do the sharing as much as possible. I like the idea of, of course, the review is obvious, but doing a screenshot and sending it back. But how do you continue that relationship? Because like what I try to do, I can't remember who said it recently, but they always say, try to add value on the spot. Like as soon as I meet somebody, and you and Danielle know this, like as soon as I meet somebody, I'm like, how can I help this person get to wherever they want to be? Who can I connect them with, what have you? But usually by the end of the podcast, I've already done all that. So I'm like, what would you suggest as far as continuing that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, just become a fan. So they put out podcast episodes every week or every 2 weeks. They don't only put out your episode.
Mhm.
So the next time they release an episode, share that one too, or comment on it, or even just like it. Do anything that you can to just get them more interaction. And they see that. I mean, I know for the podcast that I produce, I handle all of our social media on my own. So you did share our episodes and you tagged us in things, and I saw that. And that was like, wow, I'm so glad I had him on my show. Like, he clearly, like, this meant something to him and he wants to help promote us. So anything you can do like that, like, it doesn't have to be something where you mail them a gift. It can, like, the best gift a podcaster gets is reviews and shares.
Nice.
And if you meet somebody that would be a great guest on their show, pass it along. If you listen to a podcast where you're like, oh, this host would be a great guest, pass that along. So anything that you can do to just continue that relationship and not make it something that's transactional. And I talk about that in a lot of different settings, one of which is with promo swaps. So with podcasting, the best way that you can grow your show is through promo swaps. So having other podcasters promote you and promoting them as well.
Mhm.
And the best way to go about that is to make sure that you create a relationship with the host that you're promoting. Because I don't know about you guys, but I am much more likely to be just an evangelistic fan of a brand if it's run by a friend of mine.
Mhm.
So if I become a friend, exactly, Danielle is the perfect example. If I become friends with somebody and I just on a personal level want them to succeed, I'm going to do more to promote them versus if it's just somebody that I met on the street, like, hey, can I be on your podcast? Yeah, okay. So focus on that relationship. It's not just about building the relationship with the customers, it's about building the relationship with the host.
I agree. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, good morning. I also like infomercials from a campy standpoint. I don't know what it
Who
is.
are you people?
You know, maybe we need a podcast for infomercial lovers, but if there is one, you have
found
to.
your niche.
During the pandemic, I started seeing a lot of like Instagram live videos that were kind of treated like podcasts.
Mhm.
Is there a value in that? Is that something we should explore, or is it just like jump straight to a podcast?
Never jump straight to anything. Think about where your audience is. So one of the things I said before was people get their media in their chosen way. If you have a huge audience on Instagram or Facebook, start there. So you don't have to start with a podcast. But even if like, I know people who they'll do a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live, and then they'll just download that and put it out as a podcast. So you can repurpose your lives as a podcast. There's a whole debate about what qualifies as a podcast. Some people are like purists and they're like, if it doesn't have an RSS feed, it is not a podcast. I think that's BS. A podcast is just a way to talk directly to an audience. And if you do that through Instagram, that's great. If you do that through YouTube, that's great. If you do that through an RSS feed, that's great. So don't feel like you have to do it the traditional podcast way. If you've already built that huge audience on a specific media, focus there and then repurpose it other places to try to grow that audience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got more, but I'm going to wait. I'm pausing just in case anyone else wants to say something.
Anyone want to jump in before Clifton?
Okay, I'm jumping in. So I have a technical question, and then actually, no, I'll ask my first question. As far as getting booked on podcasts, what are your suggestions as far as finding podcasts, pitching yourself, getting booked, all of the above, as far as actually getting onto podcasts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a few different ways to go about it. I definitely recommend you guys figure out your message or everything, your lead magnet, before you ever try to get on a podcast. I did not do it that way. Like I said, I just talked about my ridiculous tattoo. But once you have all of that and you're ready, there's a few different ways you can go about it. I usually mention 3. One of them is just the bootstrapping. It's the finding the podcast, going to their website, finding their email address, and sending the pitch. There's a few kind of best practices around that I can share. One of them is don't try to get on every podcast. Try to get on the right podcast. If you are a basketball shoe salesperson, get on podcasts that are listened to by sports fans or athletes. Do not get on the arts and craft podcast. Yes, you may reach more people, but you're not going to reach anybody who cares. So definitely be picky about kind of where you try to guest on shows. And when you pitch, make sure that your pitch is valuable. When I talk about podcasting, there's usually 3 components involved: the host, the guest, and the audience. So you want to make sure that there's value for everybody and communicate that in the pitch. So when you pitch to them, say like, this is what I would love to teach about. This is the value that I can bring. Make it easy for them. Write the title, write the talking points. And if the more that you can give them that proves some of that value, because like you could say, hi, there's value here, but they might not see it. But if you say, here's the title and it's catchy, here's some talking points, oh, those are interesting. So kind of the more that you can give them, the better. Start already being that fan, share their content, comment on their videos, so that when you do pitch to them, they recognize you. Because like I said, we're the ones that are actually looking at this. So we will know if you guys have interacted before. And maybe even bring up something that they've said on the podcast that you really loved. And if you only use the one that they just released, it's very obvious that that's not legit. You just played the latest episode and pulled a quote. Anyone can do that. So really be a fan of the show. Listen to a couple episodes, talk about what you gained from their show, and write the review ahead of time. So when you pitch, you can include a screenshot of the review that you wrote them and like, hey, I do really love your show. I just left you a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I would love to have a conversation with you about this, and this is why. So that is if you want to just do it yourself. There are websites that help you guest on podcasts. I call it like online dating for podcasting. There's a few that are out there. The one that I like is Podmatch. It's run by Alex Sanfilippo and his wife. They're friends of mine. They're amazing. And it connects you with shows based on who you're trying to reach. So that is a really helpful tool. And then you already know that if the show is on that site, they are looking for guests actively. Versus if you are just kind of cold calling, they might not be looking for anybody at the moment. And then the third one is using a service. There are podcast booking agencies that can help you do this. Those are kind of high budget. So if you're doing a branded podcast for your company, so you have that big marketing budget and you don't have the time to do it yourself, that's a really great option. That's how we started. We were using Interview Connections. And then I've since taken over just because I've gotten all the contacts myself. So that's a really good option to do it. It is just a little bit more costly. So there's the free version where you just pitch yourself, the very inexpensive version like Podmatch. I think I pay like $20 a month to be on that. And then the booking agencies that are going to be a pretty hefty investment. But the first time we did the low tax book, we used Interview Connections for that. We had a 400% ROI in the first year. So if you have the budget, they can be worth it.
Thank
I have a
you.
question.
Yeah.
What if you are doing a podcast that's not directly for your target audience, or like in the same industry, or for like a quote unquote competitor? Should you do that? If you do, or do you have any tips on like how to approach that differently?
Yeah. Can you give me a little bit more kind of background on that?
So I'm a pharmacist. I have a consulting business where I do something kind of innovative in our industry. I help people reduce medication use. So I've been asked by a Pharmacy Innovators podcast to come speak on this podcast. But again, it's not like my target audience. I'm not necessarily gaining clients directly from it, although there's a possibility maybe I could get referrals. So yeah, I just wondered about how I would approach this differently.
Yeah. So the goal of podcast guesting isn't always to make a sale. This is when I go back to thought leadership. So if you can position yourself as a thought leader by talking about this innovative idea that you have, if you go on a podcast that's anywhere within your industry, you will be seen as a thought leader. So even if it's not your audience that listens to that show, you can send that out to your audience. So, I mean, me and Clifton were just talking about sharing podcast episodes. So if you have your own email list, share it with them. If you have your own social media, put it out there. If you're in any professional groups, put it out there. So any way that you can promote it to your audience and show yourself as a thought leader in that space. Now I lost my train of thought.
No, that's helpful.
But yeah, sharing it's going to also help you create a media reel. So any podcast that you can guest on, as long as it's relevant to anything that you're talking about, even if it doesn't have a big audience, it could be a really small, just starting out show, you still get that content. So you can repurpose that as a media reel and just website content for you to improve your SEO. One of the things that I'm really excited about that I'm launching is in partnership with one of my good friends at Red Hat Media, we are launching a practice podcast offering that you can go and record a practice episode with a professional podcast host. And it's treated like a real episode and edited like a real episode and broken out into different content pieces like a real episode, but it's not released anywhere. We just give it to you. Cool. So that before you ever actually pitch yourself to a podcast, you can try it out and but still be in kind of the same environment and mindset. Yeah. And then you can use that as a media reel, because the same thing, like when you try to get an internship, but you need experience to get the internship, podcast hosts want to see that you have done this before, so that they know you will be a good guest. It's also why it's easier to be a podcast guest if you are a podcast host. But having some kind of social proof and some kind of like media example can be really helpful. Okay. So think of it as a media example, think of it as thought leadership, and think of it as something that you can promote to your audience, even if their audience isn't necessarily yours.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Next.
I've got more.
Hit me with it.
So you kind of alluded to it, but I'm curious, like, how would you suggest marketing your past podcast appearances to leverage either more podcasts or even to identify yourself as a thought leader? Like, what would you suggest there as far as using past appearances?
Have all of them on your website. First step, I mean, that's the easy one. Actually create a reel. It's been a while since we updated it, but I had a media reel made for the host of my show that was professionally developed, or it's something that you can do by yourself. But anything that you do in the media can be used on that, and have that on your website. And if you want to be, like if you're really serious about wanting to guest on podcasts, if you're really serious about wanting to be a speaker, whatever it is, if you have a landing page on your website about like book me, so book me to speak, book me on your podcast, whatever it is, that page can have talking points for what you would talk about on their podcast. It can have a speaker one sheet that they can download. If you guys don't know what those are, message me, I'll talk to you about it. And then you can also have your reel there. You can embed the different shows you've been on and all of that. And then the same way I talked about using your own podcast as SEO, use the guest episodes. So take the transcript of that episode and write a blog about your experience on that show and why it was important for you to talk about that topic and what you learned from this and that. So whatever you can do to repurpose the content. Repurposing content does not have to be your own content. You can repurpose someone else's content. I refer to this book behind me all the time, Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. Nothing is 100% original anymore. We're constantly just stealing from other people and making it our own. So take the podcast that they have you on and make something your own out of it that you can repurpose and send to your own audience and post on your website.
That's great. Thank you. I've got more, but I'm going to pause again.
Anyone want to jump in line before Clifton asks his next one? Go ahead.
Okay. So technical question. So what podcasts apps are you suggesting right now? So I know there's a slew of them, but for someone who's thinking about getting into the podcasting world, let's say, for example, let's say this call that we're on right now, Danielle decides she wants to make a podcast out of her series. What would you suggest to her as far as technically? So she needs to pull the audio, she takes a video, maybe she throws that on YouTube, that's something, but what does she do with the audio piece of it?
So are you asking kind of how to launch a podcast?
Kind of, not so much to launch, but what specific software are you recommending right now? I guess it is launching as well, but it's not so much there's a huge launch sequence that you can come up with, sure, but the technical piece specifically, like what are you?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different answers to that question, and it also kind of depends on your budget. So there's free ways to do things, there are low cost ways, and there are expensive ways. So with the one that I produce, it is a branded podcast for a financial advising firm. So we have a pretty hefty budget. So we use a company that offers like concierge service. They do all of our production and everything. It costs a good amount of money. I'm launching my podcast next week. I'm doing it myself. I'm editing it in Premiere Pro just because I've used that software for so long and I know it. There's different hosting platforms for different budgets. I'm launching mine on Anchor, which is owned by Spotify, and it is free. It doesn't offer as robust reporting or data that some of the other ones do, but it's free, and I want to see if I like being the host before I really invest in it. One of the things I always tell people before they start a podcast is just start ugly. Don't feel like you need to go buy the $1,000 mic and invest in all of this technology, because honestly, you might hate it. You might never do it again. I don't know about you guys, but I've picked up so many hobbies that I bought everything I could possibly need for it, and it's still in the box. I don't remember the last time I tried to embroider, but I have an embroidery set. So just make sure it's something that you like before you really invest in it. There are $30 microphones on Amazon. There are the camera in your computer, if it's a newer computer, is probably better than the ones you can buy. So start kind of as cheap as you can on that, and then go from there and kind of grow with it. One other thing I really want to mention has nothing to do with your question, but if it's something that you're thinking about doing and you're thinking about launching a podcast, but you're scared that you like won't be good at it or you'll be embarrassed, you're correct, but do it anyway. I feel this way about anything. By trade, I'm a writer. I've been published to some amazing platforms like Forbes and other things. And I look back on something I published on Forbes.com a year ago, and I'm like, they let me publish that because I'm better now. But no matter when you start, in a year from now, you'll be better. So why not start now and get better sooner than wait? And if you, whatever it is that you're doing, if you don't look back in a year and feel embarrassed, you haven't grown enough. So one of my goals has always been, thank you for the applause. One of my goals has always been to just be embarrassed. And I think if you guys want to try this out, just do it. You can pod fade. Everyone, like most podcasts fade after 4 episodes. Try your 4 episodes, see if you like it. And so then back to the apps question, because I totally just went on a tangent. Like I said, I use Anchor for hosting. For the podcast that I produce for the company, I use Megaphone. I've used Libsyn. That's a good one too. I've heard good things about Blueberry. So just find the one that gives you the type of reporting that you want. You don't have to be married to it. You can change RSS sources, so that's not a big deal. And if you want to do it, but you're not really sure where to start, get a podcast coach, get someone to help you with it. It can be me, it could be somebody else. If you don't like me, I can point you in a different direction. I think I'm kind of cool. But yeah, so if you want help with it, find someone to help you. But there are so many different things that you could do by yourself.
Thanks again.
Yeah. And I think we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to put this up on the screen. But if anyone still has questions, you are more than welcome to ask them.
I was actually going to ask where they can find you, and here it is. So, and how they can work with you, because I think there's so many things you touched on, more than I actually thought. So thank you for that, because I think, you know, it's one thing to be a podcast guest, but it's also another thing to, you know, be the podcast host. So thank you for sharing both of those.
Absolutely.
I also know that you have coaching offerings, which you sort of touched on, but you do help people figure out what those things are, like the lead magnet and their the topic of interest and all of that stuff, right? So if someone wants to work with you to do that, that's also available, correct?
Absolutely. If you go to meetyourfavoritedaughter.com or scan the code, you can book. I do free 45-minute brainstorms that you can ask me any questions that you need help with getting started with, or I can give you a suggestion of what kind of lead magnet I think might be a good fit. But if you do want to work with me, I do offer 3 different steps in working with me. The first one is guest coaching. So I will just kind of go one-on-one with you and help you really master those 5 steps, help you master the interview process and how you could be a really great guest and how you can use it to grow your business. And then from there, I do give you kind of a to-do list of, well, like I'll help you figure out what that lead magnet is, and I'll help you figure out how to do it and what your funnel can be. And then from there, if you want to make it a to-done list, my next offering is I will do it for you. I will create your whole lead magnet, create your funnels, do everything. And then from there, I have, like I said, that practice episode with Red Hat Media, which is a really, really great option for someone who's just getting started in this and want to see if they have an knack for it without having to be embarrassed publicly, like I have been on podcasts I was not prepared for. So those are a few of the different levels. But yeah, feel free to book just a call with me, connect with me on social media. I'm on everything, or send me an email and I can answer any questions that you did not ask on here.
Amazing. So
I know Clifton still has a couple.
Clifton does have some, and I know some people are going to be catching the recording on this. So that's awesome that they can reach out and ask their questions to you. I know that you're really good at getting back to people pretty quickly. I've messaged you on both those platforms, except for Facebook because I'm not on there. But yeah, so super responsive and super helpful. So I'm excited to see who is going to launch a podcast after this, TJ. But I love that idea of I know if there's a few people that I follow on Instagram that do have their own podcast, and they have, I think, as you were talking about, that like cross-pollination of platforms, that they do know that most of their audience is like, they have a wider reach on Instagram. So they will do a live as they're doing that recording, and then that recording then goes up onto the recording then goes up onto their podcast after, and perhaps YouTube. So I think that's awesome that you touched on that. I love that idea of an audience that is on Instagram maybe is not an audience that is listening to podcasts in their ears. So this is super helpful. It's been really great getting to learn more about this topic and getting to know about you personally, Sarah. Thanks so much for being my first inaugural guest to my guest speaker series.
My honor.
So grateful for you, and I'm excited to continue these conversations offline. Thanks, guys, for
Absolutely.
joining us. If no one has any more questions, we will stop the recording, and then you guys can reach out directly to Sarah if you need anything.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.